Hello friends, I am Aman Parmar, student of SGS ITS College, Indore. Today we will see the small topics but the important too, the strong and weak entity sets in DBMS. So we have to explore the difference between the strong and weak entity sets in database management system and learn how these entities are defined, represented and related to each other. Understand their crucial role in database design also. As we can look in the example, there has been a book entity or publisher or a member or a borrow by, and they are linked with a single link which represent their relationship with the entities and attributes. In the oval shape, though these are the attributes, we define the entity in a simpler manner or which include in the entities. And as we look in the book ID, there has been underlined which shows this is an primary key and an attribute which link with an entity set books. Uh, there has been two entity sets. One is strong entity set and second one is weak entity set. An entity set that can exist independently and has its own primary key as we looked previously the book ID which is primary key and a weak entity set, an entity set that cannot exist independently and relies on a strong entity set for its identification. As we look in the ER diagram, the publisher play a role like a weak entity set as this is not independent. It relies on the book's entity with a relationship the published by. So we look what is strong entity set. Firstly, it has a own primary key. Secondly, the independent existence. And third one is uniquely identified. A strong entity possesses its own primary key and it's allow it to exist independently. Uh, as we can talk about a example like if we have a table name students and we have to make it independently and uniquely identified, so we have to make one column to be student ID which is different from other columns and make it independent from the other columns and behave as a primary key. And if we talk
Establish
about the
their
second
existence.
example which is
If
employees,
we
if we
have
create an employees table, as we can look in the example also, there is one employee ID which is different from other columns and play as a role of primary key and uniquely define that table. If we talk about primary key, the primary key is a column that uniquely identifies the rows in a table. A primary key column cannot contain a duplicate values, which means primary key or that column, which is a primary key, uh, should not have the duplicate
so we have
values in
to
that uh, come across there rather than they are uniquely defined difference which we can see here. The first column has the 101, the second column has the 102 number and the third is 103 and so on, which is uniquely defined and different from each other and they do not duplicate each other. Whereas if with the identifying the primary key, so for the existence of the weak entity set, they relies on the strong entity set with the help of partial key or discriminator to we see the representation of weak entity sets. We have the following manner. It describes the identifying the relationship with the help of double diamond shape and to show the link or to show the relationship or to show the participations, we have one common link between the identifying relationship set with a weak entity set, which is known as total participations, which shows the total participation. And we have, if we have to represent a weak entity set, we use the double rectangular box to represent a weak entity set, and to connect with the partial key or the discriminator, we have the one called oval shaped symbol, which have the dashed lines in it to represent the partial key. If we talk about the relationships and discriminators, so the identifying relationship may use the links from weak to strong entity sets, which establish a relationship between the weak and the strong entity. And discriminators, the distinguishes the entities in a weak entity sets. The discriminators you basically shows or distinguish between the entities in a big entity set. The big entity sets between part
Strong
linked
and weak
to strong
entity.
entity set via the identifying
Firstly, we
relationship.
have
Within the weak entity set, the discriminator or a partial key provide the distinction. If we, uh, as we look in the previous slides, we talk about the uh, some symbols or the conventions. So we have to look the ER diagram conventions. Firstly, the strong entity, which is a single line triangle, as we can see in the picture also. The second one is the weak entity set, which is double line rectangle. And there has been some attributes also represented. Uh, Firstly, we have to see the simple attribute, which is a single oval shape symbol. For the composite attribute, we have the multiple oval shaped symbols which are interconnected, and the multi-valued attributes there has been double oval shape. And for the relationship, we have the double line diamond for the weak relationship, and for single line diamond we have strong relationship, which
defined them
describe the relation between the
in
strong and
our
weak
first
entity set.
first
Factor also,
the
as we can look
definition
at it
or the
for with the help of an example in which the employee and dependents are there. Firstly, in the employee, there has been employee ID, which is which plays a role of primary key, and there has been a name and address, which are attributes of. And in dependent, there has been dependent name, which plays a role of partial key, and there has been a relation between employee and dependent with the support, with the help of supports. The employees have the dependents and a dependent name acting the discriminators, since the multiple dependents can belong to one employee. So employee ID is a primary key and a foreign key in the dependent table. Definition. In strong entity, a strong entity is a complete by itself and is not independent on any other entity set, whereas in a weak entity cannot be used independently as it is dependent on strong entity type known as its owner entity. If we have to see the second factor, the nature of strong and weak entity. The strong entity is independent in nature, whereas in a weak entity set is independent in nature. That means it depends on the strong entity. In the third factor, the primary key. As we look in the previous slides also, the strong entity has a primary key which uniquely defined their character of attribute or the entity, an entity key. In whereas in weak entity does not have any primary key, but it has a partial discriminator key. The fourth factor is the key attributes. The strong entity has a key attributes, whereas the key weak entity does not have any key attribute. If we move on the fifth factor, the representation, strong entity has can be represented by using a single rectangular box, whereas the weak entity can be represented using a double rectangular box. In the sixth factor, the participation, the strong entity can either have no participation or total participation, whereas the weak entity always have total participation. If we move in the last factor, the relationship between the two entities. In strong entity, the relationship between two strong entities is represented by a single diamond, whereas the relation between the weak entity and the strong entity is represented by a double diamond. So now we have discussed the topic strong and weak entity set. Thank you.